In today's lesson, we're going to be taking a closer look at the view controls on the view control bar. We'll also be looking at view properties and visibility graphic overrides. We'll examine some methods for using our 3D view navigation controls, and we'll also take a look at a couple of techniques for creating views. Views in Revit may be shown with different settings, which affect not only the graphics being displayed, but also the level of detail which is depicted. The view control bar here in the lower left section below the drawing view area provides access to the most commonly used settings to modify the view properties applicable to most view types. The scale setting here at the left side of the view control bar is used to modify the size of annotation elements and also control the level of detail which will be displayed for each view in your project. For example, a floor plan being shown at 1/8 of an inch equals a foot might show a door with a single line for the door panel, while the same door in a plan view at 1/4 of an inch equals a foot might show the door with a rectangle for the panel. In a plan at 1 to 100, notes and dimensions will appear larger relative to the size of the building elements than they will if the floor plan is done at 1 to 50. All text, tags, dimensions, etc. in Revit are linked to the scale setting for a particular view, and they'll automatically resize if you change that scale setting. This view is currently set up at 3/16 of an inch equals a foot. If I change the scale to 1/8 of an inch equals a foot, just take a look at the size of the annotation tag, the room name, this section head, and the dimension text when I change that scale. When I bump that up to 1/8 of an inch equals a foot, it looks like all of this text is getting larger. Now what's happening really is that everything other than the text is going to get a little bit smaller relative to the size of the sheet on which it's being placed. If I change this scale in the other direction and I go to 1/4 of an inch equals a foot, at 1/4 of an inch equals a foot, the size of the text elements appears smaller, but again what's happening is that the view itself is going to occupy more room on a sheet. Now if we actually go to a sheet, you can see this just to illustrate it a little bit more clearly. If I go to this sheet A3, my first floor plan, and we take a look at this, our view at 1/4 of an inch equals a foot is not even fitting inside our sheet. Now I can change the scale of that view by selecting the view, making it active, and then I can activate the view scale here in the properties, and we can change this back to 3/16 of an inch equals a foot. And at 3/16 of an inch equals a foot, the view fits quite nicely on the sheet. The individual pieces of text are actually drawn with a constant height. And the text for our dimensions is using a standard text size of 3/32 of an inch. If I select one of these dimensions and we edit the type, you can even see that the dimension style is called linear 3/32 of an inch stylus, and that's referencing the font style. If I edit the type for that dimension and we take a look down here, this text size is 3/32 of an inch for our dimensions, and it's always going to be that height. When I change the scale, what happens is that the overall size of the view is going to be reduced relative to a real world size sheet of paper. So when I change this scale to 1/8 of an inch equals a foot, you can see that the view is going to sort of rattle around on our sheet now, but that text, if you were to print this and measure it, is always going to be the same size. 3/32 of an inch equals a foot. So that's what the view scale does. It looks like it's changing the size of the text and arrowheads and such, but really it's just changing how big the view is relative to those text elements. Okay, let's go back to our floor plan view, and we'll go to the next setting. Now after our scale, our next setting is the detail level, and the detail level has 3 values. You can set this to a coarse, medium, or fine level of detail. The fine elements are usually reserved for things like large scale details. If you set this to coarse, something like a wall is going to generally show with just a couple of lines. It won't show the individual elements. So we don't see the brick within this wall. We don't see the sheathing on the wall. We see a sill element. You do see a portion on the inside here. But basically the wall is just going to be drawn with two lines. That's going to be true for our interior walls here as well. We're just seeing two lines. You don't see the frame and the drywall. If I change this level of detail from coarse to medium, now we see all of the elements that make up that wall. There's a layer of brick, some airspace, some sheathing, a frame backup, and then on the inside we have some drywall or gypsum wallboard finishing it. So as you change this detail level, it's going to show more and more elements. If you change it to a fine level of detail, again at this scale we're probably not going to see any change. You're going to see the big jump between coarse, and coarse is going to regenerate a little bit faster, but it's not going to show you the same number of elements. I prefer to set my views almost exclusively to a medium level of detail. It still works fast. It's not going to slow you down too much not working with a coarse level of detail, and you're going to be able to get a better read on things. It's going to be obvious whether you're drawing your wall with the brick on the correct side. When you're using a fine level of detail or a medium level of detail, depending on the scale, the elements are going to start drawing together. So there are two edges here that are very close together. If I find an interior wall, this interior wall does have drywall that's in there, but we can't actually see it because the two edges are so close together that the line weights are going to overlap. And there's a toggle that's just for the display on screen called a thin line toggle. And you can find this on your quick access toolbar. You can enable it here, or you can use the keyboard shortcut TL. And that's what I usually do. If I type TL, now it's going to display all of the lines in my drawing with a single pixel line width. So everything looks like it has exactly the same line width. In reality, the different elements can be set to draw with different line weights. So your hatch pattern is going to use a very thin line weight, but where you're cutting the brick, it's going to use a heavy line weight. When you turn on the thin lines toggle, those line weights are hidden. It won't affect the display of the elements when it actually is printed. Whether you have this turned on or turned off, when you print it, it's going to print with your true line weights. And if two edges are too close together to display separately, that's what you're going to get. It's just going to burn together. The next thing we're going to look at is the model graphic style, or the visual style. And if I take a look at the visual style, we have 6 different options. You can set this to a wireframe view, a hidden line view, shaded, consistent colors, or realistic. And if I change this to a wireframe, we're going to see right through the wall, and we'll see the floor finish down here below. If I change this to a hidden line view, this is more typical of a standard black and white representation. This is what you're typically going to be plotting your drawings to obtain. If I set it to a shaded view, then it's going to show it in color. If I change it to consistent colors, we're not going to see this so much in a plan view. If I change this to a 3D view, let's just set this back to a hidden, and I'm going to switch over to a 3D view. Let's see. We'll go to our standard 3D view and see what we have here. Our standard 3D view is currently set up to show a realistic type of appearance. If you're looking at a three-dimensional view and you look at it in wireframe, very difficult to see what's going on. It kind of looks like a bird's nest. There are so many edges in a wireframe view of a 3D model that it's really pretty much useless to use this. Now, if you use the hidden line view, now we can see what's going on. And the hidden line view gives you a good black and white representation. You can see what's going on. It does conceal objects inside, but you're not going to see any colors. If I go to the shaded view, a shaded view will show colors. It will show how the light is hitting the building as well. If you have shadows enabled, you'll see the shadows if our shadows are turned off. Even with the shadows turned off, we're not actually seeing shadows being generated on the ground or on the other walls, but you can still tell that the light is coming from the right-hand side of the screen, or the southeast direction, and hitting this side of the house. This side is in shadows. The next setting is called consistent colors, and consistent colors will disregard the effect of the lighting in the scene. Doesn't matter if the light's coming from the left side or the right side or below the ground plane. The relative intensity of the light is going to be the same on two sides of a building. And this is not something that you'd see in a plan view, but only in 3D. Our next section is called a realistic view, and realistic will show the actual textures and materials. So here, if I zoom in a little bit, you can see that we're putting some wood shingles on the roof. We have some siding on this area. We have a brick material here. You can see the glass in the windows, and you can see inside to see the wood strip flooring on the inside. The next one is called a ray trace, and you don't use this much. Ray trace is going to actually render the scene interactively in the viewport, and it's going to keep doing this rendering. Here we go. This is the interactive ray trace mode that it takes a minute to get started, and then it kicks in, and as long as I sit here and keep talking, this is going to keep getting smoother and smoother until you stop it. So we'll continue to go through the ray tracing iterations and make these edges smoother and give you a better depiction. When you want to stop that ray trace mode, then you can just reach up here and pick stop. That will end the ray trace process. When you're at a level that you consider to be smooth enough, you can stop it. If you pick save, you can actually save this image, and it's sort of like a little quickie rendering. And if I choose close, then it's going to close that ray tracer and take me back to a realistic shaded version. Now, out of these options, the most useful is probably going to be either the hidden line view or the shaded view. And I prefer shaded. Almost everything that I work with is going to be set up with medium detail and a shaded with edges visual style. The effect of the lighting from one side to the other, it just makes it look more 3D and easier to understand than the consistent colors. But without changing the lighting, if you do need to see in an area that is too dark, that's how you do it. You switch it from shaded to consistent colors, and then you'll be able to see into those dark areas. Let's go back to a hidden line view, and I'll just zoom back, and we'll take a look at the graphic display options as well. Let's see, where can we do this? We'll zoom in around this area, and from within this pop-up, where you can choose the 6 different styles, there's a heading at the top that says Graphic Display Options, and this will actually open another dialog box that has more controls about the view. At the top we have a model display, and there's style is going to show the 6 different styles: wireframe, hidden line, shaded, consistent colors, realistic, that are available from the view control bar. The only one that's missing is the ray trace mode, and we can change this here and then pick apply to see the effect of that change. We have an option to show the edges or turn those edges off, and again, whenever you have a dialog box and an apply or OK button, apply means that you can see the changes take effect without closing the dialog. So that's what a shaded view without edges looks like. And we'll turn that back on. If you choose to smooth lines with anti-aliasing, aliasing is an effect that's caused by viewing an object on a computer screen. A computer screen is divided up into a grid, and these squares on the grid are called picture elements or pixels. And when the program creates a line that is not horizontal but just a little bit angled, it has to fill in those squares on that graph paper type of background, or those square picture elements. And to create an angle, it has to go across a row and then up to the next row and then across, up to the next row and across. And you'll see this little effect of a stair step, and you can see it here, these jagged edges. On this side, it's quite clear. You can see how this steps along through the grid. If you choose to smooth lines with anti-aliasing, then these lines get a little bit thicker and a little bit blurrier, but it hides that jagged effect. And that's called anti-aliasing. If we turn that off and apply again, you can see those edges. It takes a little bit longer to generate that type of a view. We have a transparency slider, and if I set this up to be transparent, we can start to see through the model as if it's glass. And if I change this to a higher level, eventually it's going to start looking like a wireframe view. And we'll just take that back and then disable it by setting it back to 0. We have something called a silhouette edges, and silhouettes can be set up so that they show a heavier line. Now at the moment I think I have my thin lines toggle on. Let me just pick OK. No, here. So these edges in a 3D view are basically showing a very similar thickness everywhere. The edges inside here are very close to the edges along the outside. This one and this one, they're both defined as projection edges for this object. A silhouette edge would be this edge along here that I'm tracing with my cursor. That edge, I can make that appear thicker by enabling a silhouette. And if I go back into my graphic display options and I look under my silhouettes and I set my silhouettes to a wide line and then pick apply, now on our wall here, well, I guess we're not seeing it on the step, but on our walls we're seeing that silhouette edge. And if I pull back and I look along the edge of the roof, you're seeing that silhouette edge as well. So silhouettes are just taking the outer perimeter of a shape and drawing it generally with a heavier line, but you can control that type of line, and you can say that you'd like it to display in a blue line if you'd like. Unusual, I guess. It would generally be a medium line or a wide line. If you want to disable the silhouette effect, we'll just set this back to none. Now we'll close the model display and we'll take a look at shadows. And let's just pick OK, and I'll back up a little bit so we can see the shadows. The light's coming from the right, so we'll see shadows in this area if we turn them on. You can enable the shadows here on the status bar or the view control bar. Just turn them off and on. And certainly shadows will breathe life into a 3D view and make it more realistic. We can also access more controls with regards to those shadows by going into the graphic display options. And let's just pull it over here. And if I look under my shadows, I can turn the shadows off and on here. So it's just another way to do that toggle. And we can also choose to show ambient shadows. And if you show ambient shadows are sort of soft shadowed areas where there's a little bit of light going into some corners and not so much in others. So you get this soft effect in here, in the corners, when you enable ambient shadows. If I turn that off, it's a much more crisp and not quite as realistic a depiction of the shadows. If you want super realistic shadows, you'll just get it from rendering anyway. The ambient shadows will take a little bit longer to render, and depending on the view card or the graphics card in your computer, you might not be able to display ambient shadows at all. We'll turn the shadows back off and go to the next one, and the next one down is called sketchy lines. Sketchy lines are something that was added, I think it was in the 2015 version. And architects that used to draw by hand would draw something that looked very artistic. And the artistic method of doing this would be to sort of draw it a little bit freeform and to cross the corners so that when two lines meet at a corner, like down here or in here or wherever two lines meet, they would overhang each other. You'd never leave a gap. You'd always overhang them. And that overhanging is called an extension. And if I increase this extension value, enable sketchy lines and set an extension and then apply this, and we zoom in to one of these corners, well, you can kind of see it here anyway. Let's just pick OK, and I'll zoom in here. Now you can see it more clearly. So these edges or these corners are crossing and the lines are sticking past each other. We can make that a more drastic extension by going into our sketchy lines, and I'll increase the extension to 7. And as I increase that extension, the lines hang over other corners further. The other part of this sketchy appearance is to enable something called jitter. And when you jitter lines, they draw back and forth. So instead of just one line on every edge, you could have 2 or 3 or 4. And the more jitter you have, the more it becomes a very sketchy appearance. And if I zoom back here, now you can see that it's starting to have a hand-drawn feel to it. The edges get rough and the corners hang over each other. The idea is that it looks more like that hand-drawn appearance from an architect's napkin sketch. Eye candy is what it's also known as. It will sort of slow down your progress. It looks neat for a presentation view, but it's not something that you probably want to have on while you're working. So we'll go back into our sketchy lines, and yes, see how sketchy we can make it. Let's turn this up to 9 and 10 or something, and we'll apply. And there's our very loose, almost like a charcoal sketch kind of a view. If we turn our sketch lines back down and our jitter back down and lower this, less of that effect, disable it, and we're back to nice clean edges. We have some settings here for lighting as well. You can actually adjust the brightness of the sun here. We can't change the direction here. We'll do that in another location. But you can say that the sun is going to be brighter. You can add ambient light to the scene. And ambient light is going to be the light that's in a shadowed area. We can also adjust the depth or the color of the shadows. Let's turn our shadows back on. And then I can control the color or how dark those shadows will be by adjusting the shadow value here. So if you want really black shadows so that you can't see inside, you crank that up. And if we take this back down to 25 or so, the shadows are very light. So you can find a happy medium in here. I'll set an ambient light around 20 and my sunlight around 50 or so, and my shadows around 25 or 30. And that gives me a nice appearance. We have a couple of other settings for photographic exposure for rendering purposes, and also a background which you can set to a sky type of a background or a gradient set of colors or an image. And we'll just pick OK to close this out. The next setting that we find is the sun path and the direction of the sun. And we can turn the sun path off and on. And if I turn the sun path on, the first time you turn it on, it's going to say, give you a warning that the view is set up to use a default lighting or in-session lighting. And we have an option to continue with that, or we can go to use the specified project location, date, and time to get an accurate shadow study. I'm going to use that option, and if I zoom back now, we can actually see the site, and we can see this big compass rose, and we can see a representation of the sun. So this is our sun path, and the direction of our sun is currently set up so that it's casting down on our building from a 10 o'clock in the morning position, and there's a date involved as well. And if I rotate my view, we can see that our date is set to June 1st. I can change the direction of the sun a couple of different ways. If I click on any blue text, you can always change the value. So I can change this from 10 a.m. to 2 a.m. or 2 p.m. actually would be better. So if I change this to 2 or 3 p.m. and then hit enter, the sun is going to swing around to this side. And now our shadows are going to be casting in a different direction. If I pull back, you can actually pick on this sun, and if you pick on it, you can drag it around as well. So I can put this sun at 12:15, and now it's casting down on the front of the building. If I click and drag it over here, we'll set it to 8 a.m. and at 8 a.m. the sun's coming up from the east, so this building is going to be getting light here on the east side. Over here on the west side, it's going to be in shadow. If I pull back again and drag that sun around by picking and dragging it around to the afternoon, now the sun's going to be coming in from the southwest. We can change the date as well, and if I can reach in here and I can pick the date, and then I can actually choose a year, 2015, June, coming up, 7th, that's my birthday. And I can change the date to June 7th in that year, and then pick again a noon sun. We can access the sun settings, and if I go into the sun settings, within my sun settings we can set this up to a still image or a single day range, or we can disable the sun settings by choosing a lighting option. And if you use a lighting option and we apply this, that sun path has disappeared. And now we can either say that we would like the sun to come from the top right or the top left and swing it around in that direction. If I go back into my sun settings, you can choose an in-session lighting, and you can actually specify angles. So I have an altitude and an azimuth. If you want the sun to be higher in the sky, you increase the altitude setting, and that's going to lift the sun up. If you change the azimuth setting, and we set this to 135 and apply, it's going to change the direction from east to west, whether it's coming in the morning light or the afternoon light. And we change that back to a sunlight from top left, and it's going to adjust the azimuth and altitude. When you have this sun set up to a still value, then you can choose your location. So you can, this is currently set at Kilberry Place, Toronto, Ontario. And if I pick this location, I can either use an internet mapping service, and so we can actually use something like a Google map or a Bing. This is using a Bing map now to set the location. You can also set it to a default city list, and I can pick a city from my list here. I'm going to go to Victoria, closer to me on Vancouver Island, and we'll just find Victoria, BC, Canada, and then it's going to set the latitude and longitude to that location, and we'll pick OK. And then you can choose a date. This is using the current date, May 21st. If I'd like to change this to my birthday on June 7th, I've told you 3 times now, you better send me a card. And then a time of day, we'll set it to 11 a.m. Now that we're using the still solar study option again, our sun reappears. And then we can change this to AM or PM, and we can change the time. We'll set this to 9 a.m. or 3 p.m. to adjust the light. All right, we'll pick OK, and then that's our sun setting options. We have options to control the appearance of the sun with the sun settings, and then we also have options in the graphic display options here under lighting to control the brightness of the sun, and we can get at the sun settings dialog from within the graphic display options dialog as well. Just by picking on the sun settings option, we can open this up, and we'll pick OK and back up. All right, that's a good little overview of the first section of our view control bar. We made it through scale, detail levels, shading styles, lighting, shadows, and next we'll take a quick break, and when we come back we're going to take a look at the render options and the crop view regions and crop view options, and we'll also take a look at some of the temporary hide and isolate options as well. So we'll take a quick break and see you back here in a few minutes.